Chapter 1511. This clearly wasn't a disposable bottle, and after recovering it from Tang Wuling, Lan Foisi turned to the Holy Spirit Douluo and asked, "Who's this?" Tang Wuling smiled and replied, "My mother." His reply was very natural, and Yali was very pleased to hear it. In her current disguise as an old woman, her smile was extremely benevolent. A hint of envy flashed through Lan Foisi's eyes upon hearing this, and she turned to Yali with a respectful expression. "Greetings, auntie. Please forgive me for my rudeness." Yali shook her head in response. "It's all right. You're quite a beautiful little girl. Why are you posing as a man?" Even if Kyangi Dongfang had been in Yali's place, he may not have been able to identify Lan Foisi's true gender, but as the #1 healing system soulmaster in the world, Yali was far too familiar with human biology and the natural sense that the human body gave off. As such, she was able to identify Lan Foisi as female even without being informed by Tang Wuling. Lan Foisi's expression changed slightly, and she aimed a vicious glance, thinking that Tang Wuling had revealed her secret to Yali. She bit down on her lower lip and extended a slight bow toward Yali before quickly departing. Yali looked on at her departing figure, and an amused smile appeared on her face. "Looks like you're just as much of a chick magnet as your godfather was, huh?" Tang Wuling turned to her with a flabbergasted expression and asked, "What do you mean by that, mother?" Yali chuckled. "Can you not see that she has feelings for you? If I can't even see something this obvious, then all of the years I've lived would be in waste." Tang Wuling was stunned to hear this. How is that possible? She's always posed as a man, and she seems to be into women, which is why she entered this joust for a spouse event. She was telling me about how much she loved Yue before. Surely you've misjudged the situation here, mother. A resigned look appeared on Yali's face. "You're still too naive. If your godfather were in your place, he would have most likely already figured everything out. The way she looks at you tells me everything I need to know. Perhaps even she doesn't know that she's already attracted to you. I don't know what's happened between the two of you, but you tell me what kind of friend would bring you water as soon as your match ended. Even the other members of Shrek 7 Monsters aren't that thoughtful." On top of that, she came back not because she wanted the bottle back. She came back to check on you. The most important point is that a lot of her aura has accumulated on that bottle, which indicates that she's used it for quite some time. Is it normal for someone to offer such a personal item to someone of the opposite sex? Tang Wuling was rendered completely speechless. This came as a complete shock to him, as he had never even regarded Lan Foisi as a woman, and on top of that, he had always thought that she harbored animosity toward him. "There's no way, mother. You know that I only love Yue." Tang Wuling shook his head vigorously, and it was as if he had seen a ghost. Yuna really is a lucky girl. Even I'm envious of how deeply you trust and love her. If your godfather had been this decisive in his younger days, we would have been spared a lot of trouble. What's commendable about you is that you don't give other girls even the opportunity to misinterpret your feelings. I hope you can keep that up." Tang Wuling's lips twitched slightly upon hearing this. Yali continued in a meaningful voice, "There are too many temptations in this world." After resting for a while longer, Tang Wuling departed from the sports stadium with the Holy Spirit Douluo. In order to keep his identity a secret, they shouldn't have left together, but the Holy Spirit Douluo was concerned for his safety, so she accompanied him back to the Blacksmith Association. A luxury sedan stopped in front of the Blacksmith Association, and the door was opened, upon which a butler emerged before extending an inviting hand gesture toward Yali. Yali smiled as she got into the car, which quickly departed. There was another man in the car, and he said with a smile, "I'm glad to see you so happy. It's been a long time since I've been this happy. Everyone needs hope, and hope brings joy. Back when I was young, I was never satisfied with what I had, so I continued to pursue more and see more. Now that I'm older, all I want to do is protect the happiness I currently have. Instead of being bored by a repetitive life, I've come to enjoy it. I'm glad you think that." The man sighed. Yali smiled and continued, "Sometimes, I think that the heavens have been very good to me. I had a husband like Brother Min and lived happily with him for decades. What do I have to complain about? He's taken me to see all of the most spectacular sights in this world, and I wanted to follow him to the other world. But the heavens have blessed me again with such an outstanding son. I really am very, very happy, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life protecting this happiness." The man turned to Yali with a slightly surprised expression, and an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart at the sight of her smile. He wanted to say something, but couldn't muster up the words in the end. "Didn't you say that you were going to take me to eat the most delicious meatballs in the world? Let's go now," Yali said with a smile. Even though she currently resembled an old woman, the man was still enchanted by her smile, and he felt as if they had returned to the days of their youth. A beam of dazzling light shone through Tang Wuling's mind, like sunlight peeking through the clouds. He didn't know how long he had been meditating for, but he could clearly sense that his mind was being elevated. There was a qualitative and fundamental change taking place, and even he hadn't imagined that such a change would be possible after reaching the spirit domain realm. A layer of rainbow light had appeared over his enormous sea of spiritual power, and even though it was only a very thin layer, it gave off a sense of indescribable mystique. This layer of rainbow light had appeared after he had unleashed that attack, and there was very little of it, but it really did exist. The majority of the power of laws Tang Wuling had absorbed from his past elemental tribulations had been passed on to his infernal lightning vine, and it took the infernal lightning vine a lot longer to absorb this type of rainbow lightning than it did normal lightning. His other soul spirits were also attempting to absorb this energy, but their rate of absorption was also very slow. Even Tang Wuling himself could only use this elemental lightning to refine his own body, but couldn't actually make it become a part of his body. However, the situation had undergone a minute change, the most prominent facet of which was that the power of laws had entered his spiritual world to become one with his mind. Tang Wuling didn't know how much this would elevate his mind, but it was undoubtedly the case that an evolution was taking place. All of the elemental lightning accumulated within his body had disappeared. Part of it had been released during his previous 2 battles, while the rest was inside his mind. Chapter 1512. Rainbow law was the name that Tang Wuling had given to this rainbow light. It appeared that his method of cultivation was correct. In the past, his main issue was that he didn't know how to absorb this energy of laws, but through his control and usage of his restrict all laws, Dragon Emperor Break, he could attempt to absorb this energy when his soul core, Dragon Core, and mind were all combined as one. As his mind had been elevated, the small soul core that had appeared within his mind had also attained a substantial form, even though it was still only around the size of a pea. This was still an improvement compared to the insubstantial state it had been in before. Tang Wuling could clearly sense that the overall quantity of his soul power hadn't changed, but it had become purer than in the past. As expected, pressure was still the best catalyst for improvement. His consciousness returned as he awakened from his meditation, and all of his injuries had already healed. He was feeling extremely comfortable aside from a sense of intense hunger, and due to the improvements that he had just made, his belief had been heightened, and his resolve to continue working hard in his cultivation was further bolstered. "Wait for me, Yue. One day, you're going to be stunned by my power, and when that time comes, I'm staying by your side no matter what." Yuna slowly opened her eyes in a silent chamber, and a hint of bitterness appeared on her face. "I really don't want you to become any more powerful, Wuling. If you continue to become more powerful, your final opponent will be." The round-robin stage continued, and just like Tang Wuling, Kyangyu's Hangting and Lan Foisi easily defeated their opponents as well. During the round-robin stage, upsets became very rare, and after 5 days, the first round was completed. A clear divide had appeared in each group where those who had won a match were ranked at the top, while those who had lost were ranked below the winners. Tang Wuling and Li Weisi's match had been analyzed thoroughly, and many people were of the opinion that Tang Wuling had been very lucky to win. There were also people sent to interview Li Weisi about the match, but Li Weisi refused to tell anyone what had happened during the match. All he was willing to reveal was that he had lost in crushing fashion. However, despite his victory, Tang Wuling's projected final ranking in the event had gone down a few places. After all, he had thrown up blood, and his condition was very poor. Who knew if he would be able to recover in just 5 days? Tang Wuling had meditated for 3 full days, and upon making a full recovery, he had immediately resumed his heavenly refinement training. Currently, heavenly refinement was the best method of cultivation for him, as it allowed him to interact with the laws of elements in order to better understand his Dragon Emperor restriction techniques. Dragon Emperor Break was the first technique, but it definitely wasn't the last one. However, even Tang Wuling himself didn't know when he would be able to invent the second technique. The next competition date for the third group arrived, and Tang Wuling arrived at the Bright City Sports Stadium right on time. His match was scheduled to be the second one of the day, so there was no rush for him. In the waiting area, the 10 competitors in the third group had all arrived. The matches for the third group were going to take place in the morning, while those for the fourth group would be held during the afternoon. Yang Hangting was seated in a separate corner from everyone else, resting with his eyes closed. However, instead of just the 10 people from the third group, Lan Foisi was also in the waiting area. Tang Wuling was the last to arrive in the third group, and his arrival instantly drew everyone's attention. Even Yang Hangting had opened his eyes. At this point, Tang Wuling had already made a full recovery, and he was still putting on an arrogant facade with his chin raised high as he found a quiet place to sit. He had naturally seen Lan Foisi as well, but after recalling what Yali had told him, he pretended not to have seen her, choosing instead to also rest with his eyes closed like Yang Hangting. Lan Foisi couldn't help but grit her teeth at the sight of his cocky display, but didn't take the initiative to approach him. Unbeknownst to her, Tang Wuling was intentionally refraining from approaching her. Aside from Gu Yuna, Tang Wuling had come into contact with some other women in his life, such as Wisijuo and Dai Yuna. In particular, Dai Yuna had sacrificed a lot for him. However, his heart was solely occupied by Gu Yue, so he couldn't give any other woman anything. As such, he was putting on a distant and aloof facade, and he had even repressed his own curiosity about Lan Foisi's background. The competitors for the first match can enter the stadium now, Awakens announced. Two competitors from the third group rose to their feet in unison and took a glance at one another before walking out of the waiting area. They were competing with one another, so there was no need to exchange any pleasantries. To Tang Wuling's surprise, Yang Hangting suddenly stood up and took a seat on the sofa across from him. "You're Long Yu, right? My name is Yang Hangting. It's a pleasure to meet you." Tang Wuling opened his eyes, and he had to admit that Yang Hangting was an exceptionally handsome man. On this day, Yang Hangting was wearing a set of white activewear with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, looking like a sharp and dashing young man in his 20s, rather than someone who was in his 30s. Yang Hangting continued, "It's quite the coincidence that we were assigned to the same group. What do you think of our group?" Tang Wuling replied in an indifferent manner, "I think my progression is guaranteed." Yang Hangting faltered slightly upon hearing this. What was that supposed to mean? Was he saying that no one in this group could beat him? A cold smile appeared on Yang Hangting's face. "Is that so? I look forward to our match. I hope you're not going to turn up looking like a sick puppy again. I want to beat you when you're fully fit so you don't have any excuses." "Okay." Tang Wuling gave a clipped response. Yang Hangting's smile became more pronounced at the sight of Tang Wuling's arrogant display, and he stood up before leaning down next to Tang Wuling, then said in a voice that was only audible to the two of them, "Nana is already my woman. No one can take her away from me. Your breath stinks." Tang Wuling leaned back with a disdainful expression, and he intentionally made his voice very loud so that everyone else could hear him. Lan Foisi couldn't help but burst into laughter upon hearing this. Both of these guys were very annoying, and watching two annoying guys being pitted against one another was quite entertaining. Yang Hangting's smile immediately faded as a look of burning fury appeared in his eyes. He immediately stood up straight and glowered at Tang Wuling with a furious expression, then pointed a threatening finger at him before storming out of the resting area. Even as he departed, Tang Wuling made sure to throw another parting jab. "Did your parents not teach you that it's rude to point at someone? What an uncultured little brat." The other competitors of the third group all exchanged a few glances, but no one said anything. All young and powerful soul masters were proud individuals, but just because they were proud didn't mean that they were stupid. Everyone knew who Yang Hangting was. Calling him an uncultured brat was an indirect insult to the chairman of the Spirit Pagoda himself. This Long Yu was either extremely brave or pitifully stupid. In reality, Tang Wuling hadn't intended to do this. It was just that the mere sight of Yang Hangting pissed him off for some reason. In particular, whenever he thought about how both Yang Hangting and Gu Yuna were at the Spirit Pagoda, his heart would burn with fury. Even he wasn't aware that what he was experiencing was jealousy. Lan Foisi also departed as the match had already begun, and Tang Wuling was scheduled to fight in the second match. Tang Wuling had clearly already recovered from his injuries, and with her sharp spiritual power, Lan Foisi was able to sense that there was something different about him. His entire body seemed to be glowing with some type of peculiar light that was extremely faint and could just barely be detected by her spirit domain realm spiritual power. The first match lasted longer than expected, and only after half an hour was Tang Wuling called up for his match. "Please enlighten me," a tall and broad young man said with a serious expression as he approached Tang Wuling. Chapter 1513. Tang Wuling merely nodded in response, then made his way out of the waiting area while assessing the information he had memorized about his opponent. His opponent was a Douluo who was a bright young talent in the military. The military had its own training base, and with so many troops across the entire federation, there was naturally no lack of exceptional talents among them. Selecting some particularly outstanding talents to be specially nurtured at those training bases was something that every military area did, and an example of this was the Blood God Legion's Blood God Battalion. Wild Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinkai had emerged from the special training base of the Southern Legion, while Tang Wuling's second round opponent came from the North Sea Fleet. According to the information Tang Wuling had gathered, his opponent was a senior colonel, and he was the captain of the North Sea Fleet's most elite squad, the Northern Light Special Battle Squad. He had plentiful practical combat experience, and he was particularly adept in mecha piloting. The main difference between soldiers and normal soul masters was that the former took part in far more battles, through which one developed superior battle instincts and techniques. In particular, such a bright young talent like him would undoubtedly receive special treatment in the military, similar to that received by all of Shrek's 7 monsters during their time in the military. According to Tang Wuling's recollections, his opponent's name was Mutian. The two of them emerged from the resting area one after another, and having emerged from the soundproof environment of the waiting area, they were immediately greeted by the raucous commotion outside. The first match had been very long and exciting, so the spectators were in very high spirits. Our next two competitors are Mutian of the North Sea Fleet's Northern Light Special Battle Squad, and Long Yu of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon Clan. Both of them have secured victories in their first round matches, so the outcome of this battle will be very important. The commentator was Steel Fei, and his voice was very pleasant and comforting to listen to. Mutian and Tang Wuling strode onto the platform, and Mutian voluntarily made his way to the other side of the platform to open up distance between himself and Tang Wuling. Meanwhile, Fei was still hard at work. There's not much to be said about Long Yu's last match. He defeated his opponent even though he was in less than stellar condition, and he quickly left after the match. His opponent, Li Weisi, was also unwilling to disclose any details during his interview, so we have no idea what happened during the match. However, we do know that Mutian's performances during this event have all been quite outstanding. With the special Northern Light battle techniques of the Northern Light Special Battle Squad, he has crushed all of his opponents, and even now, I still feel like I can sense the threatening aura emanating from his saber. His battle techniques have undoubtedly been honed over the course of countless battles. Let's see how Long Yu is going to handle this stern challenge. Tang Wuling's cultivation rank was superior, so Mutian was naturally being referred to as the challenger. Due to the fact that Tang Wuling had been putting on an arrogant facade earlier, he hadn't gotten a chance to take a good look at his opponent, and he was only being presented with such an opportunity now. Mutian was very tall and well built, but his muscles weren't overly exaggerated, and he stood with the ramrod straight posture customary of all soldiers. Aside from that, there didn't appear to be anything special about him, but this only made Tang Wuling more cautious. Both Hao Wuchang and Li Weisi were interesting opponents as one possessed the door of summoning, while the other possessed the crystal ball, both of which were exceptional martial souls. But of course, they didn't pose much of a threat to Tang Wuling. However, Mutian was different. His martial soul seemed to be a simple saber, but his disposition was completely different from that of his past two opponents. There was nothing flashy about him, but he was clearly going to be more difficult to deal with. In the face of such an opponent, Tang Wuling was willing to afford him more respect. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, begin. As the commencement of the match was announced, Mutian immediately sprang into action, charging directly toward Tang Wuling like lightning. His strides weren't very long, but he was extraordinarily fast, and as he moved, the aura of sharpness emanating from his body elevated further and further. A saber projection that was around 4 feet in length appeared above his head, and as he advanced onward, the saber projection became brighter and brighter. By the time Mutian had covered half the distance between himself and Tang Wuling, the saber projection had turned a scorching white color. All of a sudden, Mutian let loose a loud roar, and he suddenly raised both hands up into the air to grab onto the hilt of the long saber above his head. In that instant, Tang Wuling felt as if Mutian had become one with the saber. The space on either side of the dazzling saber projection seemed to exist independently of one another, and as the saber projection was brought down from above, Mutian's essence, energy, and spirit had all been elevated to their very peak. Ever since Mutian had joined the Special Battle Squad, he had named his saber the Northern Light Saber. He had been able to make it to this point through a combination of talent and a tremendous amount of hard work, and in the North Sea Fleet, he had the nickname of 10,000 Saber King. This didn't mean that he had 10,000 sabers in his possession. Instead, it reflected a part of his training regimen, which involved unleashing 10,000 full force saber strikes into the sea every every single day. Regardless of how turbulent the waves were, he made sure to part the sea with every single saber strike he unleashed, and that was how he had attained his saber projection. Initially, he had no saber projection, but gradually, it grew to a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, 10 feet, 20, 30. After that, the saber projection was withdrawn into the saber itself, and this process took him 30 years to complete. Only after his saber projection had been completely withdrawn into his saber was this technique complete, and he named it two-realm separation. On this occasion, Tang Wuling didn't remain still on the spot. Instead, he sprang up and charged directly toward Mutian's northern light saber. The saber projection had been withdrawn, but the sharp saber intent was affecting the entire platform. The fact that Tang Wuling was able to advance in the face of the saber intent was enough to make Mutian even more wary of his opponent. However, his resolve had been honed through countless battles, and he wasn't going to waver regardless of what his opponent did. Just as the two of them were about to clash, commentator Xie yelled, "Everyone, please turn your attention toward the air in front of the northern lightsaber." The spectators did as they were told, and sure enough, all of the light in front of the northern lightsaber seemed to have been stripped away, creating a patch of inky blackness up ahead. Everyone was then greeted by the sight of Tang Wuling raising his right hand to grab toward a blade of the saber, and in that instant, his entire hand had turned a bluish-purple color. Clang! Xie was stunned into silence by what he was seeing. He was a soul master himself, and even though he wasn't very powerful, he was an expert who had studied countless past battles, and it was exactly because of this that he had been entrusted with the role of commentator. However, it was truly very rare to see someone grab an opponent's weapon with their bare hand like Tang Wuling was doing, especially when the northern lightsaber's two-realm separation was so formidable. What was he doing? Did he intend to sacrifice that hand? Chapter 1514. Before Xie had a chance to consider anything else, Tang Wuling's hand had already clashed with the northern lightsaber. The power released in the instant the clash occurred struck everyone with an indescribable sensation. The first thing that all of the spectators saw was the blackness on the northern lightsaber being shattered. As Tang Wuling's right hand grabbed onto the blade of the saber, it was as if the air had transformed into a massive cobweb as traces of blackness began to crumble away, and only then did the hand and blade come into contact with one another. Purple light flashed within Tang Wuling's eyes, and bluish purple lightning suddenly exploded in the palm of his right hand amid an explosive thunderclap. Mutian also reacted very quickly to the situation, instantly withdrawing his martial soul, causing it to disappear from within Tang Wuling's grasp to evade the bombardment of lightning. At the same time, he instantly swiveled around, and as he did so, countless saber projections erupted out of his body, slashing directly toward Tang Wuling in a frenzy. Right at this moment, the thunderclap rang out, eradicating all of the oncoming saber projections. Instead of descending onto the ground, Tang Wuling rushed forward diagonally, then performed a peculiar maneuver in midair. In the blink of an eye, 3 Tang Wulins suddenly appeared, forming a triangular circuit in the air. Each Tang Wulin was situated at one corner of the triangle with their right hands thrust forward, releasing countless bolts of lightning to form a massive net. There was no way to predict the direction that the winding bolts of lightning were crashing toward, but Mutian was situated right at the very center of the triangle. Do you know lightning triangular circuit? Xie exclaimed. He was naturally aware of the mega maneuver Tang Wulin had invented during the examination phase of the event. The maneuver had been officially recognized by the Mecha Pilot Association, which had conducted in-depth analysis on just how difficult it would be for a mecha pilot to execute the maneuver. The most difficult part was that the mecha pilot had to withstand an enormous amount of instantaneous force, and under such tremendous strain, it was certainly no easy task to maintain such an exceptional level of accuracy. However, Tang Wulin had performed the maneuver with his own body, even without having to rely on a mecha. It was difficult to say whether this was more difficult than performing the same maneuver with a mecha, but it was truly astonishing that he was able to attack while moving at such an incredible speed. Mutian abruptly landed on the ground while a saber projection erupted into the heavens, and it was as if he had completely disappeared into the saber projection. The scent of blood and steel on a battlefield wafted through the air, and the saber projection abruptly expanded just as the lightning struck, and the two intertwined as one bolt of lightning after another was slashed apart. The 3 Tang Wulin only coexisted for an instant before combining as one, following which he charged directly toward the saber projection. Xie was feeling very frustrated and confused. Why did it always seem like Oolong Yu was battling like a man with a death wish, but he always came out on top? It was clear that Oolong Yu had gained the upper hand in the previous clash. Boom. The saber managed to keep Tang Wuling's body at bay, but Tang Wuling instantly exploded like a bomb upon impact. Rumble. Bluish-purple lightning exploded in the air. Mutian was held far away by the force of the explosion. At this moment, his entire body was slightly charred, and there was lightning flashing all over him, clearly indicating that he hadn't remained unaffected by the lightning. Instead of pressing his advantage, Tang Wuling descended onto the ground and appraised Mutian calmly from afar. Mutian's soul power was renowned for its sharpness and explosiveness, and he was trying to use it to force out the lightning that had entered his body, but the lightning was simply too powerful, and both his muscles and soul core were spasming uncontrollably. It was clear that if Tang Wuling had followed up his attacks, he would have most likely already lost. Prior to this battle, he was already regarding Tang Wuling as an extremely powerful opponent, but only when the match truly began did he realize that he had still underestimated Tang Wuling. Tang Wuling was superior to him in all aspects, including power, speed, and martial soul, and his seemingly reckless way of battle was a reflection of his absolute confidence. Tang Wuling was also very pleased with himself. After developing the Dragon Emperor restriction techniques, he had gained a deeper understanding of all of his abilities, particularly the usage of his soul spirits. He had once asked the amorous Douluo why almost no high-grade soul masters released their soul spirits in direct battle, and the answer was that regardless of how powerful a soul spirit was, the enhancements they provided to a soul master was more beneficial than directly using them in battle. During that last clash, Tang Wuling had borrowed some of the Tyrant Dragon's power, and the lightning of the infernal lightning vine had constantly been revolving around his body, perfectly disguising his martial soul. His opponent was indeed very powerful, but they simply weren't on the same level. Even a hyper Douluo would find it very difficult to pose a threat to the current Tang Wuling, let alone a soul Douluo. One had to realize that Tang Wuling had stunned the entire Star Luo Empire in the Trial of 5 Gods. Mutian simply couldn't compare with someone of his staggering power. If it weren't for his respect for soldiers, Tang Wuling wouldn't have employed this style of battle. Mutian was panting heavily as he cast a meaningful gaze toward Tang Wuling. Here I come. Black light flashed from his hand as he spoke, and a streak of light was quickly projected before rapidly expanding, following which an inky black mecha that was around 7 meters tall soon appeared behind him. His body was instantly drawn into the mecha, and the entrance to the mecha pilot room was quickly shut. Only then did Tang Wuling recall that the usage of mechas wasn't prohibited in the Joust for a spouse event. Following Mutian's entry, the black mecha immediately sprang to life, crouching down before rushing directly toward Tang Wuling. It was wielding a giant saber as a weapon, and the saber instantly turned a scorching white color reminiscent of the northern lightsaber. However, due to the combination of Soul Master and mecha, its power was significantly elevated. Tang Wuling stomped his left foot onto the ground, propelling himself up into the air. Scales instantly covered his entire body as he unleashed his golden dragon body. Of course, this was the lightning version. He's still as aggressive as ever. Xie was struck by the urge to cover his own eyes at the sight of the ascending Tang Wuling. He was clearly relying solely on his overwhelming power to bully his opponent. It was quite apparent now that there was a massive gulf between Mutian and Oolong Yu, but just a few days ago, the latter had turned up to his match looking as if he were in extremely bad condition. Who was it that had been able to inflict such severe injuries upon him? Has a fully fit Oolong Yu always been this powerful? The answer to that was, of course, yes. As Tang Wuling rose to the apex of his ascent, he arched back to resemble a bow, then swung his arms through the air toward the oncoming giant saber. Boom. The air dimmed slightly, following which a piercing streak of bluish-purple light flashed through the air, as if lightning had struck the competition platform. Everyone was then stunned by the sight of a massive black mecha crashing into the protective barrier with electricity flashing all over its huge frame. The spectator stands fell completely silent. At this moment, Tang Wuling's entire arm had turned an almost transparent bluish-purple color, and he was hovering in midair like an invincible lightning god. The match was over. Xie took a moment to collect himself, then announced, "The match is over, and Oolong Yu has secured victory once again." With all due respect to Mutian, there's no other way to describe this match than as a crushing victory for Oolong Yu. Indeed, from the beginning till the very end, Mutian didn't have any chances, and he was completely overwhelmed regardless of whether it was in terms of speed, power, or martial soul. Even after he released his mecha, it had made no difference at all. Tang Wuling slowly descended onto the ground with his right index finger pointed directly upward, as if he were challenging the very heavens. Guyuna's heart stirred slightly as she looked on from the rostrum, and Kaienqi's Hanting's calm facade had also been torn away. Chapter 1515. The combat prowess Tang Wuling had displayed was more fearsome than he had expected. It was clear that Tang Wuling possessed hyper Douluo level power. Otherwise, there was no way he could have brushed Mu Tian aside so easily. The attack that he had just unleashed was his lightning god whip. He had used his own arm in the place of a vine, and his arm was slightly numb and throbbing with pain, but it had to be said that the attack had been extremely fearsome. If he hadn't held back, that black mecha would have been reduced to nothingness. The explosiveness of lightning was perfectly expressed through his lightning god whip. The main area of difficulty of impersonating Lu was that he couldn't use many of his soul skills, and this was what had motivated Tang Wuling to create more combination techniques. In reality, he only had two lightning-related soul skills: Blue Emperor Myriad Lightning Hell and Blue Emperor Lightning God Whip. Both of these soul skills were extremely powerful, but they made it far too easy for him to hurt his opponents. If it weren't for the fact that his spiritual power had been enhanced after developing his Dragon Emperor restriction techniques, thereby granting him improved control, he wouldn't have dared to use his lightning god whip just now. Otherwise, he could have easily killed Mu Tian. Looking at it now, he was quite pleased with his own application of the lightning god whip. He had decided that he was going to continue to improve the lightning god whip so that it would become one of his most effective attacks in his upcoming matches. Adopting a different identity forced him to seal away his true identity, but not all seals were bad things. The spectators were silent for close to 20 seconds before erupting into thunderous cheers. The battle they had just witnessed was very short, but it was thoroughly satisfying. Tang Wuling's dominating style of battle made everyone's hearts race, and the vast majority of the young spectators present felt as if their blood had been set alight. All of a sudden, many people had begun chanting Lu name. For the first time, they felt like Lu's cockiness was justified as he really did have the power to back it up. Lan Foisi was looking on from afar with a complex expression, and she pursed her lips as she scoffed. What's the big deal? Kaiangju's Hangting's match came right after Tang Wuling's, so the two bumped into one another as Tang Wuling strode down from the competition platform. Tang Wuling raised an eyebrow, and Kaiangju's Hangting suddenly chuckled coldly. Do you think this is enough? I hope you don't cry after I crush you. Hee hee. Tang Wuling's reply made Kaiangju's Hangting's expression stiffen slightly, and he felt like there was no way he could communicate with this Lu. Instead of departing right away, Tang Wuling lingered below the competition platform to watch Kaiangju's Hangting's match. Kaiangju's Hangting had just been irked by him, so it was very likely that he would display superior combat prowess than he otherwise would. We really are in for a treat today. The next match will be a clash between two titled Douluos, namely Spirit Envoy Kaiangju's Hangting of the Spirit Pagoda, and Lu Yixing of the Northwestern Desert. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, and only then was he made aware that Kaiangju's Hangting's opponent was also a titled Douluo. Lu Yixing was a middle-aged man who appeared to be around 40 years of age, and he was quite handsome, but he looked a little older than his actual age. He was very tall and broad with dark skin, and there was a cold look in his eyes. In the resting area, Lu Yixing had sat in a corner and remained completely silent, choosing to watch everyone around him while hiding everything about himself. In terms of appearance, Kaiangju's Hangting was naturally far more handsome. The spectators were still savoring the last match, but their attention was immediately drawn to this battle between two titled Douluos. The information surrounding Lu Yixing provided to Tang Wuling by the Tang sect was next to nothing. All they knew was that he came from the Northwestern Desert area and was a titled Douluo. He had been quite fortunate thus far as he hadn't faced any powerful competitors, so his path through this event had been quite a smooth one, and his martial soul seemed to be sand, which was very versatile and excelled in both attack and defense. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, begin. The match officially commenced, and at this moment, Mu Tian walked over from the side with his body still spasming uncontrollably. As soon as the match had concluded, healing system soul masters had rushed him out of his mecha to administer emergency treatment. Tang Wuling had intentionally held back, so Mu Tian's injuries weren't very severe. It was just that it would take some time to recover from the electric shock he had received. Thank you for holding back, Mu Tian said with a nod. Tang Wuling replied, your northern lightsaber is very powerful, and I can tell that you train exceptionally hard, but even though you're completely fearless as you unleash your northern lightsaber, you have no saber soul. You're purely using it as a weapon rather than regarding it as a part of yourself. As a result, you're foregoing a saber soul, which is a saber that can directly attack one's soul. Even the sharpest and most fearsome of attacks can be kept at bay, but how is one supposed to defend themselves against an attack directed toward their soul? Tang Wuling's gaze was focused on the competition platform as he spoke, but Mu Tian's heart jolted upon hearing this. I've always been searching for the reason why I've been unable to attain a saber soul. Is it because I'm not close enough to my saber? Only then did Tang Wuling turn toward Mu Tian as he replied, you're placing too much pressure on yourself. Adequate pressure can be converted into motivation, but excessive pressure prevents you from being able to attain enlightenment. Grueling training isn't always the answer. Watch this. His expression suddenly changed slightly as he spoke, and it was as if he had fused as one with the air around him. Mu Tian could still clearly see Tang Wuling, but it felt to him like Tang Wuling's presence no longer existed. He was then greeted by the sight of Tang Wuling slashing his right hand through the air. There was no sound or threat posed by this gesture, but in that instant, Mu Tian's entire body shuddered violently. He felt as if his mind had gone completely blank, and that as Tang Wuling swept his arm through the air, his spiritual power was completely separated from his mind. Even though this sensation only lasted for an instant, he still had chills running down his spine. Saber intent, saber soul, saber essence. Saber intent is the will of the saber, while saber soul involves fusing one's body and soul together with their saber. Tang Wuling said, I see. Then what about saber essence? Mu Tian couldn't help but ask. Tang Wuling smiled and replied, saber essence requires one to use their saber to draw upon the power of laws of heaven and earth. Mu Tian took a deep breath as he digested the wisdom that Tang Wuling had just bestowed upon him. There were powerful soul masters in the military instructing them in their cultivation, but their instructions were very different from what Tang Wuling had just described. In particular, the demonstration Tang Wuling had just given him made him feel as if a whole new world had been opened up to him. This type of feeling made him want to immediately return to training, and at the same time, he was extremely stunned. Who exactly was this Lu? If he had been wielding a saber as opposed to just sweeping his arm through the air, then he would have already achieved the level of a saber soul. Was he also a prodigious master of the blade? Tang Wuling continued. How long have you been serving in the military? Chapter 1516. Mu Tian replied, 22 years. Tang Wuling suggested, you should go out and see the world. I think it'll benefit you. I'm not asking you to leave the military, but I think you should take a long break and go somewhere that can truly help you improve. You have a very good foundation, and if you have someone to properly guide you, you'll at least have a chance to become a hyper Douluo in the future. Can I really? Mu Tian was a soldier first and foremost, but he was also a soul master, and all soul masters wanted to become more powerful. It had been 6 years since Mu Tian had become a soul Douluo, and he was still steadily progressing, but progress had become very slow for him. According to his mentors in the military, he was at an age where it would be difficult for him to even progress to the titled Douluo level, and that the hyper Douluo level was completely out of his reach at this point. As such, he was naturally ecstatic to hear that he still had a chance to reach that level. Where should I go? Mu Tian asked in a slightly urgent manner. Tang Wuling smiled and replied, Shrek Academy. On the competition platform, Lu Yixing was the first to spring into action. He didn't appear to have released any soul rings, but his body suddenly disintegrated into yellow sand. As more and more yellow sand appeared, the grains of sand began to revolve on the spot, quickly forming a vortex that was rapidly expanding, and reached Kaiangju's Hangting virtually in the blink of an eye. Kaiangju's Hangting rose up into the air, and 9 soul rings appeared around his body, consisting of 6 blacks and 3 reds. Just his soul ring configuration alone brought a wave of cheers and applause from the spectators. Even though this wasn't the first time the spectators were seeing this, they were still in awe whenever they witnessed Kaiangju's Hangting's exemplary soul ring configuration. A long staff appeared in Kaiangju's Hangting's grasp. This was his martial soul, the coiling dragon staff. It was said that the martial soul of the Kaiangju family was once just an ordinary staff. However, one of their ancestors stumbled upon a hibernating giant dragon. The dragon awakened and was about to devour the man, but it could sense that its lifespan was about to come to an end, so it made a pact with the Kaiangju family, transforming into a dragon soul that injected itself into the man's martial soul, hoping to extend its own life through the heritage of the martial soul. This was only a rumor, but it was a very believable one as all members of the Kaiangju family had innate full soul power as long as they could awaken a martial soul. Once they reached the soul elder level, they would be able to summon a dragon soul in battle, and upon becoming a titled Douluo, they would even be able to summon a true dragon to assist them in battle. If it weren't for such a powerful heritage, there was no way that the Kyangyu family would have become the most prominent family in the spirit pagoda. At this moment, Kyangyu's painting was hovering in midair with his staff in his hand, and the weapon truly presented quite a stunning sight to behold. The entire coiling dragon staff was of a shimmering silver color with a silver giant dragon coiled around it. The dragon appeared to be locked into place, but it was extremely lifelike, and its head was situated at the top of the staff, where faint dragon's roars rang out incessantly. Yellow sand quickly spread over the entire competition platform, transforming it into a barren desert, and Liu Yuxing was nowhere to be seen. Generally speaking, the opponents that soul masters wanted to face the least were those who could disappear right after releasing their martial soul. There was no way to ascertain how many soul rings such soul masters had, nor which soul skills they were using. Even if one was significantly more powerful than such an opponent, it was still often the case that a grueling battle would follow, and all opponents of this nature were generally adept at escape techniques, so it definitely wouldn't be easy to catch them. Columns of yellow sand erupted into the heavens like a series of tornadoes, instantly forming 9 sand pillars that converged toward Kyangyu's painting from all directions. Kyangyu's painting held onto his coiling dragon staff with his right hand, and in that instant, he seemed to have expanded significantly in size. He swept his staff through the air, unleashing layers of staff projections that spread through the air all around him, and a string of bell thumps rang out as the 9 pillars of sand were eradicated in unison by his coiling dragon staff. However, the sand didn't simply scatter as a result. Instead, it was swept up by a gust of fierce wind and surged toward Kyangyu's painting as an inescapable sandstorm. Hidden within the sandstorm were all types of weapons formed by sand, creating a lethal arsenal. The staff projections converged, and they seemed to possess boundless suction force, drawing in the entire sandstorm and all of the sand weapons hidden within it. Tang Wuling could see that Kyangyu's painting had improved significantly compared to the time when they had faced Dark Bell, as expected of someone who had the full support of a super organization like the Spirit Pagoda. The yellow sand was swept up by the coiling dragon staff, and in the next instant, a thunderous dragon's roar rang out as dazzling silver light erupted out of Kyangyu's painting's body. The silver dragon on his staff seemed to have instantly sprung to life, and a massive silver dragon's head appeared above Kyangyu's painting before releasing a silver breath. The breath was completely translucent, as if it were formed by countless shards of ice, and as it surged through the air, all of the yellow sand that was swept up by the coiling dragon staff quickly disappeared. Kyangyu's painting's eyes also turned a silver color as he threw his head back and let loose a long cry. He then swept his coiling dragon staff downward, and the breath released by the silver dragon's head instantly fused into the staff. One end of the coiling dragon staff was held in his hand, while the other end rapidly expanded before being slammed heavily toward the ground down below. The descending staff resembled a massive bolt of silver lightning, and it crashed directly down upon the center of the competition platform. Boom! Silver light erupted in all directions, and all of the yellow sand that came into contact with it quickly disappeared. As the silver light continued to spread, a figure was forced to stumble out of thin air in a sorry display. Most of the yellow sand on the ground had vanished, and Kyangyu's painting descended from above, sweeping his coiling dragon staff through the air once again, releasing a string of staff projections that came crashing down toward the figure that had just emerged. Boom, boom, boom. Liu Yuxing defended valiantly, but the staff projections were filled with explosive power, and he was forced back in retreat, quickly reaching the protective barrier on one side of the competition platform. I concede. Liu Yuxing yelled. The staff projections were withdrawn, and Kyangyu's painting was looking completely unflustered as he stood at the center of the competition platform. In the distance, Liu Yuxing was looking quite pale. The yellow sand that had been eradicated by the coiling dragon staff was actually a part of his soul power, so losing so much of his sand in such a short time had been extremely taxing for him. Even though he was also a titled Douluo, he was made to look completely defenseless in the face of Kyangyu's painting. It was clear that Kyangyu's painting's victory had made more of a statement than Tang Wuling had, as his opponent was a titled Douluo. Throughout the entire battle, Liu Yuxing didn't have any opportunities and was dominated by the coiling dragon staff from start to finish. Kyangyu's painting gave Liu Yuxing a nod of acknowledgement, then cast a mocking gaze toward Tang Wuling, as if to flaunt the fact that he had just crushed a titled Douluo, while Tang Wuling had nearly defeated a soul Douluo. Tang Wuling's brows were slightly furrowed in contemplation. Was this Liu Yuxing really that weak? Liu Yuxing was his opponent for the next round. If this was all that Liu Yuxing was capable of, then it should be an easy match. Tang Wuling didn't linger any longer, intent to depart, followed closely by Mutian. What do you think of Kyangyu's painting? Mutian asked. Tang Wuling replied, he's not bad, but still not enough to defeat me. Chapter 1517. Mutian faltered slightly before instantly being influenced by Tang Wuling's self-confidence. Prior to their match, he had thought that Tang Wuling was rather arrogant, but after facing him in battle and receiving guidance from him, Mutian had developed a sense of respect toward him. Pride stemmed from power. Pride without power was idiocy, whereas pride that was backed up by power was confidence. I've already made up my mind. After this competition, I'm going to return to the North Sea Legion and apply for leave, then go to Shrek Academy. I wonder if Shrek Academy will accept me. Tang Wuling smiled and said, if you give it a shot, you'll have a chance, but if you don't, you'll have no chance. Mutian's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, and he said, I understand. I'll stay or watch all of the matches, particularly yours. I wish you luck in securing the ultimate prize. Tang Wuling chuckled. I'll do my best. Of course, he couldn't tell Mutian how to enter Shrek Academy and what Shrek Academy would give him, as doing so would blow his cover. If Mutian still couldn't take this opportunity even after everything that Tang Wuling had told him, then it simply wasn't meant to be. Shrek Academy required more talent, particularly in the form of teachers, for its rebuild. Mutian was from the North Sea Legion, and the Tang sect had already investigated his background to ascertain that he was a trustworthy individual. If a seasoned military veteran like Mutian could join Shrek Academy, then the education of the out-of-court disciples would definitely benefit significantly. The experience that the military had in training soldiers had been honed and refined over many years. Even though it couldn't produce freakish talents like Shrek Academy could, the military's training methods were definitely still worth incorporating and learning from. Shrek Academy was still a wealth of cultivation information, and there were still many powerful beings among its ranks, so there really was a very good chance that Mutian would be able to make further progress there. Let's talk. Wuling. Right at this moment, a captivating voice rang out in Tang Wuling's ears. Tang Wuling reflexively stopped in his tracks. He couldn't sense anyone beside him with his spiritual power, so he was slightly stunned to hear this voice. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that his spiritual power had reached an extremely advanced level, and he was one step away from being able to achieve mental manifestation, which was a signature ability of Limit Douluo. However, he was still completely unable to sense where she was, which meant that her spiritual power was definitely superior to his. Go on ahead. I have some things I need to take care of, Tang Wuling said. Mutian gave an affirmative response, then extended a bow toward Tang Wuling before departing. Go back to where you're staying first. Her voice sounded within Tang Wuling's ears again. Tang Wuling's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. For some reason, he felt like there was something off about the way she was speaking. He quickly returned to his room in the Blacksmith Association, yet just as he was about to focus on sensing her presence, a silver door suddenly appeared before him amid a flash of silver light, and she emerged from within it. She was still as beautiful as ever, and she was wearing a long dark blue dress that further accentuated her regal beauty. Gu Yue. A gentle look immediately appeared in Tang Wuling's eyes at the sight of her. Wuling, you should leave, Gu Yuna said in a quiet voice, and a hint of exhaustion flashed through her eyes as she spoke. Tang Wuling raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. What do you mean by that? Gu Yuna replied, I don't want you to participate in this event. You should leave. Tang Wuling's expression fell slightly. You want me to leave so you can choose Kyangyu's painting? Gu Yuna looked into his eyes with a complex expression, as if she were wordlessly communicating the question, do you trust me? Tang Wuling's answer was immediate and decisive. I trust you, but I'm not going to leave. Gu Yuna sighed. As I'm sure you've already guessed, I've stayed in the Spirit Pagoda this entire time not because of how powerful it is as an organization, but instead because I have an ulterior motive. In a sense, the Spirit Pagoda is my enemy, and only by staying there can I better target them. This chance for a spouse event is a part of my plan, but you're currently destroying my plan. I don't want you to get swept up in this as it'll put you in a lot of danger. Kaiangyu Dongfang is a madman at heart. I don't want you to be in any danger. She paused here for a brief moment before continuing. I won't let anyone else touch me aside from you. Tang Wuling had been rather perplexed and even a little displeased by what Gu Yuna had told him, but that final heartfelt declaration instantly made his heart completely melt. He reached out to embrace her familiar and enchanting body, and as he inhaled her unique fragrance, his heart was filled with satisfaction. Gu Yuna returned his embrace in a very natural manner, and she was also blissfully content. The sense of safety that she derived from being in his arms made her unconsciously close her eyes, and she suddenly realized that she was becoming less and less able to resist him. In fact, she no longer even wanted to try and resist him. You never told me why the Spirit Pagoda is your enemy, and I don't see how that conflicts with our relationship. All of the leads we've gathered point to the Spirit Pagoda playing a role in the destruction of Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect headquarters, so why can't we face this common enemy together? It's not the same, Gu Yue said in a quiet voice. Tang Wuling insisted. How is it not the same? I understand that it's easier to destroy something from the inside, but this is too dangerous for you. I don't want you to take such a risk. Can't you place more trust in me? I'm going to continue participating in this Joust for a Spouse event no matter what. I won't allow you to belong to anyone else, even if it's just for show. It's not the same, Gu Yue repeated. Wuling, please leave or just forget about me. Tang Wuling's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he grabbed onto Gu Yue's shoulders to put some distance between them, then looked into her eyes with a scorching gaze. Say that again. Gu Yuna's eyes were filled with complex emotions as she said, forget about me, Wuling, or you'll be in even more pain in the future than you are now. There's no way that we can be together. I can't tell you the reasons behind this, but if there were even the slightest possibility that things could work out between us, I wouldn't be saying this to you. Just forget about me. It's the best choice you'll ever make. What exactly are you hiding from me? Why can't you just tell me? I'll stand by your side no matter what. Can't we face everything together? We can't. Gu Yue suddenly yelled as she shrugged off Tang Wuling's hands, and a frosty look also appeared in her eyes. There's no way we can face my issues together unless you can betray the entire human race, the Tang Sect, Shrek Academy, your friends, even the entire world. Can you do that? Her voice suddenly became very cold and forceful, but upon closer inspection, one would discover that her hands were trembling slightly, clearly indicating that she wasn't as calm and detached as she looked. Chapter 1518. Tang Wuling was rooted to the spot upon hearing this. He had never had such a fierce argument with Gu Yuna before. Being with her meant that he would have to betray the entire human race. He really wanted to impulsively tell her that he was willing to do that, but could he really do it? Shrek's 7 monsters, Yali, everyone in Shrek's 7 monsters, and the Tang Sect. Could he really betray all of them? He knew that he couldn't, and there was no way he would even try to do it. He wouldn't be where he was today if it weren't for Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect. He could never forget how the teachers of Shrek Academy had given up their lives without any hesitation to protect the students and the glory of Shrek Academy. He could never forget how the Atlas Douluo had taken on that massive explosion and the most powerful beings of the Holy Spirit cult on his own, resulting in even his soul being harvested from his body. The heritage of Shrek Academy and the Tang Sect was something that his generation had to continue to protect with their lives. How could he betray them? Why? That was the only question that Tang Wuling could muster up. Gu Yuna looked deep into his eyes, and there were tears swimming in her own eyes. I'm sorry. I'll tell you everything someday. Don't love me anymore. Go and love someone else. I can't give you everything you want, and there's no way we can be together. Tang Wuling asked, do you love me? Gu Yuna suddenly strode forward and shoved him in the chest with both hands, causing him to stumble back into the wall behind him. Tears then began to stream uncontrollably down her face while silver light radiated from her body. Forget about me. I never want to see you again. Those were her final words. Tang Wuling slumped back against the wall and allowed himself to slide down until he was sitting on the ground. Ever since he had first met her, no one else had occupied any space in his heart, and only after years had passed did he discover that she had only arrived by his side because of Naya. He had known her for over 10 years, and during that time, she had always supported him in a quiet and subtle way. That was what had made him fall in love with her, and his love for her was irrepressible and completely unreserved. However, she was only getting further and further away from him. He had never seen her get so emotional in all the years that he had known her, and he could sense that there was a special hint of oppression in her emotions that struck even him with a sense of asphyxiation. Every single word she had just said was engraved deep into his mind, and his heart was throbbing with pain, but not because she had asked him to forget her or for him to betray all of humanity. Instead, his heart was aching for her sake. She had asked him to forget about her and no longer love her on many occasions, but she had never told him that she no longer loved him. Her tears were like soul missiles that exploded in his heart, hurting him so badly that it was difficult to breathe. Why? Why wouldn't she just tell him what she wanted to do? Why was it that loving her would require him to betray the entire human race? Why wouldn't she just tell him everything? On this occasion, Gu Yuna's departure seemed to hold a hint of finality to it, as if this were their final farewell. Everything seemed to have changed, but the change hadn't taken place recently. Instead, it had already occurred on the night that she had given herself to him. That night, she had given every part of herself to him without any reservation, yet right after that, she seemed to have built up a fortress around her own heart. Tang Wuling sat in a complete daze, and only as night fell did he gradually return to his senses. He couldn't leave, and nor was he going to. Just as he had said, he couldn't allow her to be with Kaiangyu's hunting, even if it were just for show. On top of that, this operation targeting the Joust for a Spouse event was not just for her sake, but also for the Tang Sect and Shrek Academy. Ever since that tragic bombing, the Spirit Pagoda had constantly held the upper hand, and it was time to retaliate. Tang Wuling forcibly calmed himself down so he could objectively analyze the issue presented before him. After some careful recollection of all of his past experiences with Gu Yuna, he felt like his mind had become a lot clearer. He had already grasped some important points, and even though he couldn't come up with anything concrete, he had already devised a few possible theories. In any case, he had to continue walking down his own path. One thing was for sure, there was no way that Gu Yuna would hurt him no matter what. On top of that, it was imperative for him to continue to work hard in his cultivation and become more powerful. Even if she really wanted to turn on the entire world, he would just have to abduct her and imprison himself together with her, not allowing her to hurt anyone else, nor allowing anyone to cause harm to her. However, all of this required him to be more powerful. The soul core in his mind pulsated gently along with the sorrow in his heart, and Tang Wuling felt like he could sense some changes taking place in the power of laws again. His emotional fluctuations filled him with an indescribable feeling, and the light around him began to warp slightly. In that instant, it was as if over a decade had suddenly passed by. How he wished that he could return to his carefree life back when he had first entered Shrek Academy. That was the happiest period of his life where he was completely free from all burdens. He really wanted to go back so he could be with her and his friends. Specks of light began to form tiny fragments around him, and within those fragments of light were a series of familiar figures. There were Gu Yue, Xu Shaoan, Xu Lizzie, Yuan and Yui, Yue Sangyu, and Yu Xinglan. There was also the Shrek Academy of the past. All of it was being depicted through mental manifestation. In this moment, when his heart was filled with sorrow and reminiscence, his spiritual power had made another breakthrough. He closed his eyes, and the memory fragments around him became clearer and clearer. He basked himself in the past, and it was as if he were going through his life a second time, ending all of his regrets so that everything became perfect. A layer of translucent light surfaced over his body. The more advanced one's spiritual power became, the greater the impact it would have on their powers. The achievement of mental manifestation meant that one's spiritual power had truly combined as one with the rest of their powers. This was the most important hurdle one had to overcome prior to becoming a limit Douluo, and only after overcoming this did it become possible for one to progress to the limit Douluo level. However, Tang Wuling had achieved this not long after becoming a titled Douluo, and this forged a more solid foundation for him to reach greater heights in the future. He stood still in the spot for an indeterminate period of time, and when he opened his eyes again, it was still nighttime outside. The sadness in his heart had already faded, and it was as if all of the pain had been washed away by his mental manifestation. Compared to his past self, his eyes had become clearer, and his aura had become even more obscured, like that of an ordinary person. This was a result of the return to simplicity he had achieved following his mental manifestation. Chapter 1519. Return to simplicity was the goal for all soul masters, yet Tang Wuling had achieved it even without his own realization. He had become a titled Douluo after that night of bliss with Gu Yuna, yet it was due to their altercation that he had achieved return to simplicity. It had to be said that everything seemed to have been designed by fate. Only after taking a look at his soul communicator did Tang Wuling realize that he had been standing on the spot for 2 whole days, which meant that this was the 3rd night since Gu Yue's visit. Zhenhua had stipulated that Tang Wuling was to be given absolute peace and quiet, so no one would disturb him here, and as a result, no one knew what had happened. A sense of enlightenment had surfaced in his mind, but due to the emotional fluctuations that Gu Yuna's visit had brought on, he was completely unable to calm himself down and latch onto that sliver of enlightenment. After briefly brushing his teeth and grabbing something to eat, he returned to the heavenly platform. He needed to vent his emotions right now, and only lightning could calm him down. The Joust for a Spouse had reached a relatively uneventful period, and the myriad beast plane was still still as popular as ever. Every single day, many high-grade soul masters would line up to enter the plane, allowing the spirit pagoda to profit massively. In contrast, the hype surrounding the Joust for a Spouse event had died down slightly as there were matches being held every day, and it wasn't all that exciting anymore. Only when there were important matchups was interest rekindled, and in order to continue promoting the event, the spirit pagoda had already begun issuing rewards to the competitors who had already been eliminated. After the first 2 rounds of the round-robin stage, each group had a cluster of competitors with 2 victories, and they were undoubtedly the favorites to progress. The most heavily anticipated group was still the third group. Not only did it have 4 titled Douluo, 2 of them were handsome young prodigies in the form of Xie Xie and Douluo. There were many people who were lamenting the fact that they were in the same group. If they had been in different groups, it was very likely that they would both progress, thereby presenting both of them as options to do Yuna. In the fourth group, Lanfoisi was also displaying tremendous power and had 2 victories to her name. There were young prodigies in other groups as well, many of whom were at the Soul Douluo level and possessed special abilities. There were only 7 rounds left, and every round was very important. However, the spectators knew that the winner of the clash between Xie Xie and Douluo would most likely be the one to progress from the third group. The third round finally arrived, and funnily enough, Tang Wulin's opponent for this round was Liu Yixing, whom Xie Xie had just defeated in the previous round. Liu Yixing's defeat had been a crushing one, and the outcome of his match against Tang Wulin would undoubtedly be an indicator of how Tang Wulin would match up against Xie Xie. As Tang Wulin arrived in the resting area, all of the competitors from the third group discovered that he seemed to have become slightly different. He seemed to be less arrogant and more downtrodden. To put it in simpler terms, he appeared to be in a foul mood. Xie Xie had already arrived, and his opponent for this round was the weakest competitor in the group, so there was no pressure on him at all. He took a glance at Tang Wulin, and a hint of mockery appeared in his eyes. Just as Tang Wulin had deduced, Liu Yixing hadn't displayed his full power against Xie Xie. Liu Yixing had actually already been recruited by the Spirit Pagoda. He possessed exceptional aptitude and had devised his own unique style of battle in the northwestern desert, but that area was simply too poor, and he had run out of money to support himself in his cultivation at just the sulking level. As such, he had no choice but to seek out a powerful backer. The Spirit Pagoda had always had a focus on recruiting outstanding talents, whom they would try to convince to sign contracts of servitude to the Spirit Pagoda in exchange for compensation. Liu Yixing was a great success story stemming from these efforts, and he was now quite a high-ranking member of the organization. If it weren't for the fact that he was used to living in the desert and there were simply too few soul masters there to warrant a branch of the Spirit Pagoda being built, he would most likely be a branch chairman right now. The restrictions that the Spirit Pagoda imposed upon him were significantly less than what they had been in the past, and he was similar to an elder of the organization. He had been assigned to the same group as Xie Xie to provide him with a relatively easy victory, which was why Xie Xie had managed to defeat him in such crushing fashion. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been such a drastic disparity in power between them. In complete contrast to Liu Yixing was Douluo, who was a thorn in Xie Xie's side. He definitely couldn't allow such threatening competition to progress to the final 10 with him, so he arranged for the 2 of them to be in the same group, thereby allowing him to prevent Douluo from progressing any further. Even though Xie Xie was confident that Yuna would choose him, this was a safety precaution that he felt necessary to take. Tang Wulin didn't close his eyes to rest. He merely sat there with a gloomy expression. Even Yu Tian didn't approach him to greet him as he could sense that there was something off about Tang Wulin. Meanwhile, Liu Yixing was appraising Tang Wulin this entire time. The instructions he had received were simple: defeat Tang Wulin at all costs. If he could do that, then Xie Xie would grant him 10 opportunities to enter the myriad beast plane. That would be enough to elevate his soul rings to a high level and grant him greater power. Right at this moment, Lanfoisi strode into the resting area. She was wearing a set of crisp white robes, and she immediately strode directly toward Tang Wulin upon catching sight of him. Tang Wulin was still in his own bubble, seemingly oblivious to her approach. Lanfoisi stopped right in front of him and said, "Come with me, Douluo. I have something to speak to you about." Tang Wulin replied in a cold voice, "I'm busy." Lanfoisi faltered slightly upon hearing this. "I have something serious to discuss with you." "I told you, I'm busy," Tang Wulin repeated as his brows furrowed slightly. A furious look appeared on Lanfoisi's face as she grabbed Tang Wulin and wrenched him off the sofa. "What are you busy with?" Staring off into space. A cold look instantly appeared in Tang Wulin's eyes. He was already in a bad mood, and Lanfoisi certainly wasn't helping the situation. Lanfoisi faltered slightly at the sight of Tang Wulin's frosty gaze, and she was just about to say something when Tang Wulin grabbed onto her wrist. His iron grip made her reflexively let go of him, and all of a sudden, an extremely formidable aura began to emanate from Tang Wulin's body, as if he had suddenly transformed into a ferocious beast. Chapter 1520. Lanfoisi was completely unfazed, and she circulated her soul power as her entire body became ethereal and insubstantial. It was as if there were another Lanfoisi looking down from above, ready to dominate the situation if required. However, the aura that Tang Wulin was releasing was quickly withdrawn, and it was as if nothing had happened. He released Lanfoisi's wrist and said, "Let's go." After that, he led the way out of the resting area. Lanfoisi was rather dumbstruck by this turn of events. She was fully prepared for a battle with Tang Wulin, but he had suddenly withdrawn his aura, and the sight of his departing figure made her feel a little sympathetic for some reason. In particular, the dejection that had appeared in his eyes right before he had departed was tugging on her heartstrings. Outside the resting area, Lanfoisi strode over to Tang Wulin and said, "Come with me." Tang Wulin followed her to a corner without asking any questions. "That Liu Yixing is more powerful than he made himself look in the last round," Lanfoisi said in a concise manner. "I know, I can tell." Tang Wulin replied in an indifferent manner. "Is that all?" Lanfoisi asked in a cold voice. "Are you a dog?" Tang Wulin's brows furrowed slightly. Lanfoisi continued, "If not, then why are you acting like a mad dog?" Tang Wulin was rendered speechless by this. "I'm not in a good mood today, so I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to raise my hand against a woman, so I'll let you off the hook for grabbing me back there. Thank you for your good intentions, but they're wasted on me. Also, aren't you into women? I have no intention of making you straight, so don't fall in love with me." After that, Tang Wulin immediately departed, while Lanfoisi's fury bubbled over like a volcanic eruption. A burst of tremendous force erupted in a small area, instantly enveloping Tang Wulin within it. Tang Wulin felt as if he had stepped into a deep-sea vortex, and there was fearsome pressure surging toward him from all sides, threatening to pulverize his entire body. There seemed to be countless tiny vortexes within this one vortex, tearing ferociously at his body from all directions, and there were even sounds of violent crashing waves all around him. Right at this moment, Tang Wulin's eyes turned a golden color, and a peculiar sensation erupted within his body. His right hand instantly transformed into a golden dragon claw, and a peerless sense of authoritative might surged forth, causing all of the surrounding waves to instantly subside. In the same instant, Lanfoisi felt as if all of the power within her body had been completely stripped away. Immediately thereafter, Tang Wulin's right hand closed itself around her neck and picked her up from the floor. Restrict all laws. Dragon Emperor break. The two of them were situated too close together, and Lanfoisi didn't know that Tang Wulin possessed such an ability, so she immediately fell prey to it. Tang Wulin's forte lay in melee combat, and this was the resting area, so Lanfoisi hadn't dared to unleash the full extent of her power. As such, her attack was instantly eradicated by the abridged version of Tang Wulin's Dragon Emperor break. Electricity coursed through Tang Wulin's golden dragon claw, instantly numbing Lanfoisi's entire body. Dragon Emperor break had the ability to instantly nullify all energy-based attacks, and after making a breakthrough in his spiritual power, he was now able to utilize the attack with even greater proficiency. On top of that, Lanfoisi had been blinded by her rage, which was why she had been instantly overwhelmed. Tang Wulin withdrew his lightning and set Lanfoisi down on the ground next to the wall as an apologetic look appeared in his eyes. "I'm sorry, I really am in a bad mood today. Thank you for your words of caution." He wanted to distance himself from Lanfoisi to avoid a repeat of the Yuna situation, but he was still kind at heart and unable to repress his apology. He didn't dare to linger in case Lanfoisi sought revenge after recovering from her paralysis, so he quickly returned to the resting area. Several seconds later, the numb sensation in Lanfoisi's body faded as she gasped for air. Why was it that she was completely unable to control her own body just now? What kind of ability had he used? Could it be that her boundless vortex had failed to affect him? That was a powerful technique created by her mother. Could it be that he was even more powerful than she had imagined? It seemed that her concern for him was unnecessary, and what was that about falling in love with him? She Who would fall in love with a stinky man like him? The matches for the third round commenced. Tang Wuling was fighting in the first match of the day. Perhaps this was something that the Spirit Pagoda had intentionally arranged. It's time for Oolong Yu to take the stage again. I'm sure this is a highly anticipated match for everyone, and we're certainly not wasting any time, seeing as this is the first match of the day. Now then, I'll begin my brief analysis. Commentator Fei was busy at work again. Oolong Yu has displayed crushing dominance against all of his opponents in the event thus far, and it's undoubtedly the case that he's one of the hot favorites of the competition. His opponent for today, Wu Yuxing, is also quite powerful, but unfortunately for him, he lost in the last round to Kaiyangyu's Hangting. As we all know, Kaiyangyu's Hangting and Oolong Yu are the two biggest favorites of the third group. Kaiyangyu's Hangting has already defeated Lu Yuxing. Will Oolong Yu be able to follow in his example? Perhaps we'll be able to get a better gauge of the power comparison between Oolong Yu and Kaiyangyu's Hangting through this match. So I'd advise everyone to pay close attention to this match. The two competitors have entered the venue, and the referees are ready. In reality, the role that referees can play in matches between titled Douluo is very limited as the clashes are simply far too fierce. We can only rely on the competitors themselves to exercise restraint in order to avoid inflicting unnecessary harm upon their opponents. Now then, let's begin the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, begin. The two competitors were ready to go, and Lu Yuxing naturally wasn't going to treat this match lightly, but at the same time, he had great confidence in himself. He had suffered a comprehensive defeat at the hands of Kaiyangyu's Hangting, but only because the match had been fixed in advance. However, he certainly wasn't going to be holding back against Oolong Yu. Defeating Oolong Yu would grant him 10 chances to enter the Myriad Beast plane and better his relationship with the heir to the Spirit Pagoda Chairman, Kaiyangyu's Hangting. So he would be killing two birds with one stone. As such, he was going to defeat Oolong Yu at all costs. As soon as the commencement of the match was announced, Lu Yuxing instantly transformed into sand that spread in all directions. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.